this is part of my Thanksgiving edition. Let's go through this and answer some questions. If a child is investigated at school by the principal and resource officer, shouldn't the parents be aware and notified of the investigation? The child is a minor and doesn't understand Miranda rights. Now, that is a frequent misunderstanding of parents. Guys, there's something called in loco parentis. And so when you enroll your child in a government school, okay, I know we call them public schools, but we got to be realistic. This is a government school. So it's a government school to where you enroll your child, and because you enroll your child, you now have intertwined yourself with the legal parameters that exist on what a school can do and you know what the standard protocols are. Okay, children have diminished rights in this country, and most of their rights are held sort of, you know, under you. You know, you are the citizen, so to speak, and your child and their limited rights are encased and protected under yours. Okay, in most instances, kids in this country have diminished rights. They don't have the same rights as we do. They just don't. Okay, so any child below that, whenever adulthood is, depending on your state, some states are 18, some states are 19. They just don't have the same rights. Okay, and so when you enroll your child in a government school, then at that point, when you hand your child over to the school, put them on the bus, or you drop them off, then there is a temporary exchange of parental rights from you to the school, to where the school acts as parent. And when they act as parent, that means that in some ways that's autonomous and separate from you. That their job is to protect them and educate them and keep them safe during that time frame that you aren't there. So they are now in possession of your child's limited rights to a point, okay? But that's the consequence of you enrolling them in the government school. It doesn't work that way if it's private school that you have to pay for, because that's a capitalist system where, you know, you're the customer and they have to make you happy. Okay, it's not the same thing. You can sue a private school, can't sue a government unless it gives you permission to do so. So even if they hurt your child, there's not necessarily a thing you can do about it. Why? Because they also have immunity, because they're the government. Your private school would not have those same privileges. And a lot of parents don't understand this. I mean, you know, you really do intertwine yourself in a big mess. I mean, you know, parents go, "Oh my God, you know, my child has chronic health issues, and I'm getting truancy notices because you enrolled your child in a government school, and you've intermeshed yourself with the government's crazy laws that include, we will arrest you if you know, for whatever reason. So therefore you're strapped. You can't go on vacation. You can't do X, Y, and Z unless you go and beg the government parent for permission to do whatever you want to in your life. I find that stuff ridiculous. But you know, you enroll your child in a government school, then you hold to their rules, not your rules. Their rules. If you really sit back and think about it, guys, it's their rules. They're not your rules. Okay. So within that, in loco parentis, to where they act as parents, there's also Supreme Court decisions that have come down to where, you know, if your child, they can search your child's car if it's on school property. They can search your child's locker without consent, without notice. They can have drug sniffing dogs walking in the hallways, sniffing lockers, and they can pull your child out of class, and they can sit there and grill them, talk to them without your knowledge. In loco parentis, they just can't. Do I think it's right? No, I don't think it's right. But at the same time, you enrolled them. And so that's sort of the consequence. And it's a big one because some of these kids will end up getting picked up. They'll end up getting arrested. And then the parents called, and then the parents like, oh my God, you didn't say anything. And the kid's like, well, I mean, the principal pressured me. I get that one a lot. They pressured me, or the police was in there and they pressured me to write this witness statement, or a statement about what happened. And I was scared. And so, and then and you weren't in there. So you don't know how much leading went on as to how to write that. It happens so frequently. And depending on what the seriousness of the charge, can defense attorneys, or like me, we also do juvenile criminal, because once again, it intersects in some of these cases that we have. We'll get some of that stuff thrown out, but at the same time, juvenile court works differently than adult court. It's just not the same. It's absolutely not the same. It's more hairs on the back of the neck and tingly feelings, guys. It's not about an absolute beyond a reasonable doubt standard. It's just not. Why? Because most of the states in this country work off of a standard of rehabilitative. And so it's not about punitive in juvenile criminal. It's about rehabilitation of the child. And so because of that, it's sort of a diminished standard of review of guilt or innocence. In fact, in Alabama, for example, it's not even, when you're up there, it's not, they don't ask if you're guilty or you're innocent. That's not, when you plea as to whether you admit to what you're charged with or you deny. It's admit or deny. It's not guilty or innocence. It's a different standard. So it's a different standard with the idea that we're rehabilitating the child, not punishing the child. Now, I find that absolute and utter bullshit, to speak Italian, sorry. But that's, because I see a lot of punitive in there. But that's the standard that the umbrella's under. So schools, along with resource officers, can do a lot of damage in between that time, to where they can sit there and manipulate stuff, question your kid, get witness statements that they put an immense amount of pressure on the other kids to provide those statements. It's not a fair system. But once again, you enroll your child in a government school, you have to comply with the government rules, and you have to understand the government game. And the government game is we've got the power, you don't. And there's nothing I can do about that. That's the government system that was set up. I fight it, but don't think it's fair. Don't think it's fair. Because the juvenile standard is different. It's not, like I said, it's not the same as the adult criminal. Don't sit there and you can't get to get this thrown out or that thrown out. Because the process wasn't followed. Because it's not about punishment, it's about rehabilitation. You see? Little nooks and crannies you can sit there and survive in these little gray areas as a government agent, to where, were you wrong? Well, yeah, you were wrong, and it was putrid, and it was disgusting and sick, but I was just trying to help the child. And there's so many people, from administration to police, that are inside the school, that what I hear all the time is, well, we got to charge them to help them, James. You see, we got to charge them to help them. And my thing is, you didn't have to charge them. And what makes you think that putting something on a child's records, well, it goes away when they're, I don't care, the stigma, all of those things. And the other thing is, how ignorant are you as a police officer not to understand what 504 and IDEA bring to the table with regards to services? So when you sit there and you say, well, we got to charge them to help them, they think that there's these magic rehabilitative services coming down that just exist out here in juvenile world, and that's just not the case. There are some things, but the school system is the first stop, and they have access to more money and more services and more responsibilities to help with teaching your child and therapeutically helping your child than any of these other outside agencies like CPS or DHR or the juvenile justice system. And that's just a reality. Or mental health. These agencies that sort of help are appendages that can help in juvenile justice. The school has double the amount of options. than any of them. But the schools don't want to spend that kind of money, and a lot of the principals are ignorant that they have the first stop responsibility. So they end up kicking this stuff over to juvenile justice, or they're using the police in inappropriate ways. Okay? And you sit there and you go, well, then what do I do? Well, I mean, you can go and tell the principal, I absolutely do not want my child questioned or by the police or by you without being notified in advance. You can say that, and there's some schools that will respect that, and some principals that they're bad people and they're bad leaders, and they're nasty, putrid human beings that are power hungry, or drunk on power. They'll say, I can do what I want. But the good ones that are just ignorant, because ignorant I can work with. I can work with ignorance. Ignorance can be overcome with education, which is the point of this page. But power hungry, drunk with power a-holes, no. They're incurable. They just shouldn't be in those jobs. All right? They should be doing something else to where they're not lording over other human beings. But unfortunately, people that like that get a thrill out of lording over other people and telling other people what to do, they tend to find themselves in positions like administration or police. And that is not a benefit to our society at all. And like I said, that's incurable. Those people do a lot of damage, and they violate a lot of people's rights. Okay. And just the other concept that you need to understand, that's a Latin concept as well, that has sort of creeped into our schools, is also in parens patriae. And what that means is the government as parents. And so not only do you have in loco parentis, to where, you sort of transfer your parental rights temporarily to the school during the school hours when your child's there, there's the other concept of in parens patriae, to where the school or the government acts as parents over you. And that's why we have things like mandatory reporting, to where, I just suspect medical neglect, or I suspect that the child is unhappy, or making wild claims that most of the time is absolutely not true with regards to sexual innuendo of abuse at home and things of that nature. I mean, I can't tell you how abused mandatory reporting is by school staff. Absolutely abused. With no consequence, because there's no consequence for being wrong. All right? But it has a destructive nature on the family side. And where I typically see that happening isn't with middle and upper class families. Okay? And that crosses demographics. All right? It doesn't matter what race you are or what ethnicity. If you are within this income level, CPS and DHR, they don't really bother you. As far as the school mandatory reporting on you, okay? But if you are lower middle class or poor, they will be on you like white on rice, guys. And across every ethnicity and a racial demographic. And it's just, and the only thing I can think is it's power perception, and it's a power differential. It's amazing. Well, I'm not going to get into that. Just, I hope that this all helps. Okay, that your parents have that realization that when you enroll your child in a government school, you comply with the government rules, and they write those rules, not you. Now, I know everybody goes, oh, but I'm, a citizen, and this is my public school. Yeah, I get that. And it's a nice theory, but it's a fiction. You have no control. All right? It's a government school. They have immunity. They write the rules. And there would be a lot of things that would have to change on a legislative side in order to chip away at that and give you the power that you once had about 30 years ago. Parents had a lot of power about 30 years ago. It's been chipped away. and increasingly more after 9/11. All right.